welcome to another episode of the Tell Nut Show. As always, we are your hosts. We have the wonderful and fantastic Kirsha Fox. She is the author of The Son of Deception and The White Leaf Child. She's a homeschooling mom of four, avid reader, and gamer.
And my co-host is Julie J.K. Allen, editor, author, and author coach. She's a fantasy and horror author who loves to put magic in everything.
Yes, and we're very excited to welcome our guest tonight. Go ahead and tell us all about that.
Yes, Emily Michel read her first fairy tale just before kindergarten and has been fascinated with speculative fiction ever since. She's traveled the world, calling many places home before settling back in Arizona a few years ago with her husband and kids. When not writing romance, Emily edits for others, reads, walks, crochets, and pets her feline overlords. Welcome, Emily.
To the show. Yes. I also love crocheting. So always love to meet a fellow yarner. But tell us about your writing journey. What got you started in writing and what does it look like for you so far?
So I was a very sick kid and spent a lot of time alone in the hospital. And I was left to my own devices. I wrote a lot. I read a lot.
Yes.
And in second grade, I submitted a story and it got a little award in the district. So I caught the bug very early, but lost it along the way. High school was very college focused, so essay writing and history reports and things like that. And then my husband was deployed for the 5th time, and I finally decided to get the stories that were keeping me company at night out on paper.
Yes. I think, of course, we're sorry to hear you were sick in the hospital a lot as a kid, but I think we can relate a lot to escaping and reading and writing a lot as children.
Absolutely.
Yes. So tell us, so you said that you read a fairy tale and that's kind of how you caught the bug, but what do you love so much about writing speculative fiction?
I like being able to create my own world and some of the rules within the world. It's not always a nice place out there, and it's kind of nice to be able to make rules that are a little kinder sometimes.
Yes. I think, world building is not the easiest thing to do, but at least it gives you a place where you're like, everything makes sense in this world because of these rules. Yeah.
That's relatable.
That is very, very relatable. I myself get a little intimidated by too much world building, so I usually do like the contemporary fantasy type thing, where it's like the world hiding behind our world. You have a little bit less world building to do, but it sounds like you like that part of writing.
I do. I have a tendency to do a little bit of both. So I have paranormal romance, of course, which is that contemporary fantasy. And then I do have a, high fantasy romance as well, where I've created my own world. Where I've created my own world.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you tend to stick with the romance side of stuff as well?
Yes, I've really been enjoying exploring the relationships I've been able to create. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, that is amazing.
What are your favorite tropes to write?
Second chance.
Yeah,
I like a good second chance. I tend to prefer a medium or a slow burn over a fast burn, but not always.
Right.
And then I like a strong female character with something tragic in her past, and so she's working to overcome that. So even if she may not necessarily be physically a badass, she has overcome something in her life that makes her, emotionally a badass.
Yeah, I love that too. I like the medium to slow burns as well. I think they're so satisfying when you finally get that, like they're holding hands or they're kissed. Like, it finally happens. You're like, yes, I've been waiting for this. Like, that build up can be very nice to work with.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes even like a smoldering glance or anything, and you're just like, ooh.
that tension, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I like the tension when it's
yes,
not
the tension
so
is the
quick,
best.
you know.
Right. Kind of
Yes.
a game
When an
of.
author can do the tension, the forbiddenness, can do that for you. Like I buy everything that they ever put out because it's so
Yes. Yeah.
good. So, can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? How do you go from like idea to finished draft?
Yeah.
Um, so I like to call myself a barbecue writer
Okay.
Okay.
because I I am not entirely a plotter. I am not entirely a pantser, but I'm not a bread machine, a churner either.
Oh, yeah.
I need to add fuel to the fire on a regular basis in order to end up with the perfect brisket after 12 hours, you know?
Yes. Yes.
So I do a little bit of planning and then I do some writing and then ideas come to me and I'll write those down and then I explore them a little bit and then I have to sometimes walk away for a little bit and then I come back because I've figured something out or I've looked something up.
Hmm.
And then I write some more and yeah, it's kind of that, but it goes quickly.
Hmm.
I tend to draft in about 3 weeks to 2 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, and then usually maybe 10 days of planning, 5 to 10 days of planning beforehand.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that analogy. My partner really loves smoking meat and grilling and stuff like that. And but like it's true. Like you get the fire going, and then you add the flavor with the different woods and things like that. And that it's a great analogy because I like immediately somehow knew exactly what you meant when you said I barbecue. Because it's kind of like you let things percolate and let things do their thing, and then come back and keep adding little bits
Mhm.
of flavor
Yeah.
to it. I love that. What do you think is the most important part of writing?
Oh goodness, the most important part. Um, I think, at least for me, the most important part is getting that first draft done.
Hmm.
So as messy as it might be, as incomplete as it might seem, as bad as it feels sometimes, having that complete draft done means that you can then go and do all the other things you need to make it a story worth reading. It's always a
Right.
story worth telling, but you need to make it a story worth reading.
Oh, I love that phrase. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's great. It's a story, always a story worth telling, but we have to make it worth reading. That's
I
perfect
really
way of
love
putting
that
it.
answer. You're
Yeah.
completely right. Like it doesn't matter if the book is this beautiful, amazing thing if it's not ready, if it's not done. If you
Right.
Yeah,
complete it,
Right.
it's not going to go anywhere. You have to finish it first.
yeah,
Yeah, that first draft is so crucial to getting it out of your head and onto the page so that you can then perfect it. Yeah, I love that.
Mhm. Do you think that characters are or plot are more important? What do you focus more on?
oh goodness. Okay, in drafting I focus more on the plot,
Hmm.
but then I add in all the characterization in my revisions.
Yes. Yes.
That's how my brain works. I know other people do it
Hmm.
differently, and that's perfectly fine. Whatever works to get it out on the page.
Right.
I believe the characters and the plot interact in a way that's always important.
Hmm.
Unless you're writing literary fiction, you need to have buy-in with the characters and with the plot in order to really hook your readers.
Absolutely. In a perfect
Hmm.
world, we have that balance of both. And I love how you say they interact with each other because a lot of times knowing your characters will help you figure out the plot, right? Because they're faced with a situation. What will they do?
Yeah,
I know Miranda's going to go this way, or Gina's going to go that way, or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
Hmm.
that's a really great way of putting it. I really characters are what I really love about stories. So as a reader, I definitely want characters, but not only character. We want the plot to be exciting and to let us know what's happening.
yeah.
Yes,
Unless you're trying to be a James Joyce, yeah, you got to have at least a little bit
Right.
of plot in there. So,
Not all of us have Finnegan's Wake within us. Yes, with the mythology and all that crazy stuff. Yes, that's yes,
mhm.
very literary driven. can be more character focused. But do you have a favorite author, and what do you think they do really well?
Okay, so right now I'm going to say John Scalzi, but this changes as I change both in my reading habits and my writing
Hmm.
habits. Um, I like him a lot because he's very clever. So he will set up a joke that will pay off in a few chapters. And if you were paying attention, it's hilarious.
Right.
And he makes us care about these sad sack characters in a way that you wouldn't think you should, but you end up doing. And he just has this imagination that is so off the wall and offbeat that I really
Yeah.
enjoy reading his books.
Yeah, I'll have to check him out because it sounds hilarious, and I love, like, writing humor is not easy. So
Yeah.
I love that not only does he write humor, but that he he builds up that anticipation between like the hook and the punchline. Because I feel like only really good comics do that when they do like comedian shows and like the HBO specials and all of that, where
Yeah.
they'll set up the jokes and keep going, and they're telling jokes the whole time, but they don't really pay off that first joke until the very end of the show, and you're like, how did I not see that coming? But it was so well done that, like, that's what you enjoy about those shows, is that like clever little build up, and then bam, it hits you, and you're just like, ah.
Yeah, and he's very good at doing that. And you're like, I think
Yeah.
this is the way he's taking it. And sometimes he does, but he does
Mm,
it in a way you're not quite expecting. And then sometimes
right.
he undermines it. I think that's the other thing I really enjoy about it, is that he knows his tropes, his science fiction tropes. And
Okay.
sometimes he
Yeah.
plays into them and gives you exactly what you're expecting. And then sometimes he undermines them and still gives
Mm.
you exactly what you want, but you didn't know you wanted it until you have it.
Right. Oh, that's so satisfying
That
as a
is
reader.
satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I
I
really,
hope
yeah.
as a romance writer that occasionally I can do that. Is I can,
Right.
set up a trope and then undermine it in a way that is still very satisfying.
Yeah, no, I love that. Giving you what you didn't even know you wanted is, I feel like, what we are all looking for as readers, but we don't even know, like, that's what we're looking for.
Mhm.
I love that. Yeah, that's great.
I particularly enjoy when an author can make you like an unlikable character,
Yes.
Yes.
or you find yourself falling for the villain a little bit, or like the evil
Mm-hmm.
big sister that you really hated, and like now you understand her, and they're
Right.
pull you in, and you're like, I was so determined not to like this person, but
Right. And then they give you that little kernel of their truth that makes you see, like, this is why they are the way they are, and why they've made
yes.
the choices they've made. And then you're
Mhm.
like, oh, I can't hate you. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. The movie Lisa Frankenstein did a pretty good
Okay.
job of this with the stepsister,
Oh, yeah.
because she sets her up to be like the cheerleader that everybody loves.
Right.
And so you would keep expecting her to go all Regina on
Right. Mean Girls.
Lisa,
Mhm.
but she doesn't. She's just a good, honest person. And so it's
Aw,
kind of like
yeah.
it's that setup, it's that undermining the trope a little bit. And at the
Right.
end you realize, like, oh, I can like her. She's a decent human being.
Right, right. That reminds me of Ever After too, with Drew Barrymore, with the one stepsister. Because traditionally, the story of Cinderella, the two
Mhm.
stepsisters are both jerks and both mean to her, but the one sister's kind of like, "Hey, I'm in a similar boat as you, right?"
Yeah.
Like being given the horse
Yeah,
costume to
like
wear to the ball, and yeah.
she's still not making good choices, but you see her fear. You see the position she's
Right.
in, why she's doing the things she's doing,
It's
and at the
very
end, she gets a
precarious
bit of
for her.
redemption for
Yes.
turning on, on the other two. So
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I
love that
love when
movie.
they humanize the kind of who you would see as like the bad characters, when they humanize them, and you can see like, oh, they're just struggling to get along in this world as well, and all of that.
Yeah.
And it gives you the opportunity to love more characters than you thought you would in the beginning. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
great.
All right. So, what would you say you've learned from the writing process?
Patience.
That's a good one.
It's never been my strong suit. I have
Right.
learned a little bit more about patience with writing because you just you can't write an 80,000 word book in a day. You just
No, yeah.
can't.
Mm-hmm.
It
Mm-hmm.
takes time. You have to do it a little bit at a time, and then you have to
Right.
do it again a little bit at a time. So,
Yeah, it's going over the edits and all of that.
yeah.
For sure. I wish we could write a novel overnight, but I feel like you'd have to make a shady deal with the Fae to get that accomplished. You know what I mean? Like a
Yes.
Rumpelstiltskin situation. You
Yeah.
know, like,
Yeah.
King's asking for a book overnight. I need something to happen, but
Mm-hmm.
then you're promising your firstborn to someone you don't even know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Never a
Sometimes
good
you're
idea.
sometimes you're sitting at the computer and you want nothing more than to just write, but like
yeah,
they're not talking and it's not writer's block
right.
exactly. You're just tired or
Yeah,
or
yeah,
you haven't thought about it enough. It's not ready yet in your
Yeah.
brain to come out.
right.
And
It
like you
hasn't
can
percolated.
sometimes pants it a little bit, but like it's just the magic isn't weaving right then. So sometimes
Right.
you just have to get up and walk away and come back to it. But all of that
Absolutely.
takes time. And it's really frustrating when you start comparing yourself to other authors who are just
Mm-hmm.
whipping them out and they're like, yeah, I write every day 1,000 words. And you're just like, dang.
Must be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you have to be okay being the writer that you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that can like that self-acceptance is really difficult sometimes.
It
Mm.
is, and it's a continuing practice.
Yes.
And
Yes.
when you're
And
so
patience is a practice too, that you're constantly we're working to be patient. And it's not something that you're like, oh, I've acquired this and I have met my goal and I'm done with it now. Like,
yeah, yeah,
wouldn't that be nice if it was like that? But
yeah, and you don't
yeah.
know when you first start out, you don't know what kind
Mm.
of writer you are. You have some
Right.
inklings, but you don't know everything that's going to work, so you have to
Mhm.
try a lot of different things
Yeah.
at first to figure it out.
And even then you evolve.
Yeah,
Sometimes some books just come out a different way.
yeah,
Exactly. I encourage everyone to always be re-examining their writing process because I feel like mine is constantly changing. I'm needing constantly different things for different projects, and the way I approach things, I need to be like always adapting it. And I think that that's really helpful because like I thought I was like a pantser and I never finished a novel, and so I was like clearly this isn't working. So that's what really helped me to be more open-minded about trying new techniques and processes.
yeah, and that's important.
Yeah, yeah, it's really great when you have that self awareness to kind of understand like I work well under pressure or I don't work well under pressure.
Yeah,
So that like deadlines are a thing you need, like
Mhm.
figuring out what you need to have the motivation to keep going. Because like when you hit that sagging middle,
yeah.
you're gonna need the motivation. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. There's always a part of the book where you need that motivation to push through.
Right.
Um,
I always love those memes where it's like, this is great. I actually really like this. Oh my god, this is trash. I hate this. And then you get back to like, oh, I really like this again. But you do go through that phase where you're just like, oh, this is like the worst thing I've ever written and I don't like any of
Mhm.
it just because you've read it a million times and you're trying to make it better and
And
better
it's
and
not done yet,
you're
and
getting
you're comparing it to
frustration.
somebody else's completed work or even your own completed work.
yeah.
Right.
I tend to
I've-
forget that my completed works took a year or more to do. And
Right.
here I am trying to write this next one. I'm like, oh, it's just not as good as the other two. Of course, it's not
It's
yet because it's in a
Yes.
first
it's
draft.
just a draft. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I
Yeah.
and then sometimes it works the other way too. I had one that I thought was really bad. Actually, I thought it was a
Mhm.
really bad first draft. Like I might have to scrap it all and rewrite it. And then I went back to it in the first read through after putting it aside,
Right.
and it wasn't bad. Like it still needed some
Right.
expensive rewrites, but I'm like, the bones are here.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
But like
got
in
what I
that moment of
need.
frustration, you're ready to throw it all away.
Yeah,
I understand that. I also love that you said that you put it aside because I think that's very important because people like as an editor, I always tell people like give yourself time to forget what you wrote.
yeah,
And that's the best time to start editing. So you have to at least take 2 weeks off. It's so hard because you're like, I have a deadline. I need to get this done. I want to keep working on it. But like, you really need to see it with fresh eyes.
yeah.
So
That
yeah,
one I was talking about was a year.
Yes, you
I
let
took
it
a
sit.
year off. I chased a shiny, so
Yeah, so time well spent, yes.
yeah, I chased a
Time well
shiny,
spent, but yeah, let that sit.
and it just sat, and it was almost exactly a year, and I'm like, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. And some
And
of
that's
it
what,
was just
yeah.
I forgot things as I was going along, so like I would
Mm-hmm.
forget names, and so it felt bad, but really I just had a whole bunch of bracket remember name here,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I
It's
use a lot of
yeah.
brackets. They're really good
Yeah.
tools.
I take a lot of notes to myself, and my greatest fear is that like it'll survive into the manuscript and just be like big battle here, or something will be
Right.
written like that. Because I do take notes to myself all the time, but that's been really helpful for my writing process to have those
Yeah.
little notes. Like they talk about this, and when I'm stuck and can't write it, then I just leave a note and move on to
Oh
what I
yeah.
can write.
The search function is like my best friend. All I have to do is search
Yes,
those brackets and I get every single one.
yes, yes.
Yeah, I use Scrivener for
Mhm.
drafting,
Oh, okay.
and Scrivener makes it easier than Word to just drop yourself a note. So you can
Yeah,
highlight something, you can drop yourself a note. So I'll like fight scenes. I almost have to always come back
yeah.
to. So I
Hmm.
might sketch out like a few key moves and then who wins the fight,
Right.
but it's
Hmm.
very short, and I know it needs to be longer, and so I'll sketch it, and then I'll just drop a note. Revisit
Yeah.
this fight scene. Watch some videos, describe what's going
Mm.
on. Things like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Using videos for fights is like a really great tool that we have access to with the
Yeah.
internet and like all the great technology. There's so much on YouTube you can look up. Even with HEMA, like the historical European martial arts, like they have some amazing videos that'll really inspire you if you're writing a fight scene. That's such a
Oh
good
yeah.
tool to use. Yeah, yeah. No, YouTube is definitely, I think, the writer's friend.
I
And
try and figure out how people did it before, but you had libraries. You'd go to the library and you'd
right,
see,
right.
videos and descriptions and
It was a
reference
lot
books.
harder back
Yeah.
then. Yeah, yeah. No, YouTube is great. I mean, even for like things like my partner fixed the dryer after watching a YouTube video on it, and I was like,
Yep, we've done that.
what an amazing world. You know what I mean? We live in these days. Yeah. Just like thank God we weren't born in the 16th century. It'd be a lot harder.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, if you could give a new author some advice, what would you tell them?
I would say that you have to figure it out on your own way. You have to learn how to make writing a habit for you
Mm,
and not worry about how other people make it a habit for them.
right.
Um, there's a lot of comparisonitis going on
Mhm.
in everywhere, of course, but especially when you're new, you don't know what you don't know yet. You don't
Right.
always know what works for you yet, and so you're trying a lot of new things, and sometimes that can make you feel like you're failing when something
Mm,
doesn't work for you, but that just means that advice doesn't work for you.
right.
Not that it's bad advice or not that you're a bad writer. It's
Right.
just there's not a match. There's not a mesh there.
Right. No, I love that because like one of the reasons we love doing this show and why we focus on talking about writing process and the questions we do is because we really believe like there's as many different ways to write as there are writers writing.
Mhm.
And so hearing from everyone their different processes might inspire you or you might say like, "Oh, that's not for me." But like you can like realize like, "Oh, there's so many different ways of doing this without
Yes.
feeling like you're doing it wrong."
Mhm.
Right.
A lot of people
Yeah.
learn how to write, high school, college, and their
Mhm.
teachers might hammer into them that there is one way to do it.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
Yeah.
have to plot. You have to have your complete outline done before you even sit down and write the first sentence.
Right.
Or just they'll really try to pound these ideas in their students, and plotting can be
Never
a
use adverbs.
wonderful
Never do
tool.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You may
Yeah.
not do this. You may not use too many adverbs. You may not use the
Mhm.
simplest words you can. Don't, get flowery. They'll have
Yeah.
very strong opinions, but they
Mhm.
forget to tell their students that these are just their opinions. They no, this
Right.
is the rules. And so I feel like when you learn that you can break the rules,
Mhm. Right.
That there are no rules and this is all made up and you can do
Yeah.
whatever you want as long as it's a good story, you know,
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the
and
thing,
people can
like,
understand it.
Yeah.
yeah, when people talk about like, oh, you have to write at a fifth grade level, like the Hemingway app and all of that. It's like Hemingway was a great writer, but like so was the woman who wrote Anna Green Gables, and she writes very differently. Like there's just so many different tastes
Mhm.
out there in readers. There's so many different ways to do it that, yeah, these like hard and fast rules are for like a certain type of writing, and it doesn't work for everyone.
So if
Yeah.
something's not working for you, throw it
Yep.
out.
Throw it
Try
out.
Try
something
something
else.
else.
It
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
works. Put it in your back pocket. It might work better at a different point in your author career
yeah.
or with a different project. But if it's not working, try something else.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that's great advice. I always like to tell people too that like oh my god, I just lost my train of thought. I was like it's in my head and then it was just gone. This is why we edit because we
Yeah.
have these ADHD moments. Um yeah. Maybe it'll come back to me, but we'll see. Um Yeah, I love that. I love what you said though, because it's just like, yeah, it doesn't always work for you now. It might work for you later, or something else will work better for you. So just
Yep.
keep trying and have all those tools in your pocket. Hmm.
So how do you make time for writing?
Um, I have older kids. My oldest is actually an adult now, and
Oh
the
yeah.
youngest got his driver's license this past fall. So I don't have a lot of immediate care responsibilities. They can feed themselves, they can bathe themselves.
Right.
I do remind them to go to bed, but so they don't need me, as much. So I can kind of write whenever I need to.
Oh, that's nice.
It took time. I mean, obviously, I started writing my first book when they were still fairly young,
Hmm.
and I would do it when they were at school. I would do
Right.
it when they went to bed. I would do it when my husband took them on Boy Scout trips. You know,
Hmm. Right. Right.
Mhm.
Stealing time here and there.
yeah. But now it's much more regimented. I tend to write in the afternoons and evenings when it's fairly quiet. And the mornings and afternoons are usually for my paid clients. And then if I get things done quickly, I can have a little time in the afternoon for my own writing.
Yeah,
So,
personal project. Yeah, yeah.
My youngest is 2. I'm very
Yeah.
much looking forward to being in this age where you are.
Yes, yes.
you know,
And unfortunately, Kirsha also homeschools, so she doesn't get that freedom in the day.
yeah, it's rough.
Yeah,
When they were home over the summer, when they were around during 2020 when everybody
yeah,
was home. Oh my
yeah.
goodness, it was so hard to get anything done.
Right, right. That's why we love to ask that question. Usually the answer is I don't sleep or something along those lines because yeah,
Yeah,
it is hard to prioritize writing time. But I feel like it's so great when people do prioritize it. I know I always feel better for having written. And so that's something I'm trying to remind myself when I'm like, oh, but I'm tired, or oh, I could be working on X, Y, and Z. I'm like,
yeah,
you'll feel so great if you just work on a story, though. That's
yeah.
kind of my struggle
Yeah,
personally.
my husband sometimes is like, "You're working so hard on this." I'm like, "But the writing is fun. Like,
Yes, it's fun
it's
work,
work, but it's
right?
fun work. So it doesn't
Uh,
count quite the way that other types of work count.
Mhm.
right. No, I can understand that completely because it's like you're using your brain, but you're engaging all those happy chemicals while doing so, and so you want to keep doing it. Yeah, that's great. Um, let's see. What is your favorite part of writing?
Um, I like the drafting.
Hmm.
I
Figuring the
really
story out.
do. It's just because I don't do a lot of planning. It's when I discover the story, when I discover the
Yeah.
characters, and so the drafting is a lot of fun for me.
Yeah, do you do anything in particular to figure out your characters and get to know them? Like, is there a special like free writing about them? Like, how do you get to know them?
It depends a little bit. I usually kind of the most of the time a story comes to me like with a scene. There's like a spark of a scene, a
Mm-hmm.
spark of an idea, and then I just kind of build from there. I go through the emotional wound thesaurus and
Yeah.
see what makes sense with what I know about the character, and then I do a goal, motivation, and conflict
Mm-hmm.
kind of chart. So I think about what their outside goal is, what their external
Right.
goal is, what's motivating them towards it, and what's getting in their way of achieving it. And then I think about what their internal goals might be and
Right.
how that
Right.
plays into their external ones. Sometimes it's it matches, and sometimes it's at loggerheads with it. So
Right. No, that's awesome. I never really thought to separate goals into external and internal, but it makes so much sense when you put it that way because I do something very similar where it's like goal, motivation, flaw that impedes the goal, right? Like we need to know those three things about every character because you can have characters with the same goals but different motivations that
mhm.
changes everything about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So I really love adding in that aspect of what they're trying to get, but what with their internal goals that might be in conflict with that. And so there might be that warring that's going on
Yeah.
behind the scenes. I love that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so I tend to think of it as what do they want versus what do they need.
Oh, yeah, that's a
And
great way of
sometimes it's
framing
the
it.
same thing, and
Right.
sometimes it is not.
I feel like most often it isn't in a
Yeah,
lot of ways because we think we want something because we have this need that we think will be filled by that. But then you find out through this journey of life that the need is very different and we can fill it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I like that. What they want versus what they need. I'm going to have to start thinking about that more often.
Yes.
That's great character development. Yes, I love that.
'Cause it's a lot of it. It's true to real life where like, when you're
Yeah.
younger, you think that you want this thing, but when you're older,
Mhm.
you recognize that having gotten that would have been the worst thing ever because
Right.
Mhm.
what turned out was better than what you could have imagined at that time. You know,
Yes. Yes.
so, it's good when people see that within the characters,
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's so true that we go through life and we get these disappointments and then later on hindsight we see like, oh, that was perfect for what I needed at the time, you know?
Yeah.
That can be really poignant too to have those little that
Yeah.
catastrophe wasn't so catastrophic. It actually
Yeah.
made my life much better in the end. Yes. Those
Yeah.
moments are great.
Yep. I agree. And they're really nice to see on paper. And
Yeah.
it's fun to see when someone does get what they want and then they slowly realize that that's not what they needed at all.
Ah, right, right. Sometimes getting what you want can be kind of the worst thing for you, and then coming to that realization and having to make amends and fix it.
Yeah.
That makes for a great story too. I'm getting so inspired by this conversation. I love it. Thank you.
It is a very inspiring conversation. I was just like, oh
Ah,
man, how can I apply this to my characters? Because that's such a good
right?
point. I'm just over here quiet,
Yeah.
like
Spinning
letting
the wheels are spinning. Yeah. Ah, I love it.
remembering all the times in my life that some disaster pushed me in the right direction.
Yes, yes. Do you have a least favorite part of writing?
Um, it is the revisions I have to do after my beta readers get a hold of it
Okay.
because it's a big old ego check.
Right.
Yes.
Everything has been going fine, at least relatively speaking. I think I've solved all the problems, and invariably,
Right.
my beta readers will find the problems and they will be very kind about it.
Right. But
But
there's still
they will
problems.
find the problems that I didn't see, and that's hard.
Yes, yes, I can understand that. Yeah, because you're like, oh, this is great, it's ready to go, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, but why does this happen? Because then that doesn't make sense, and you're like, wait,
Yeah.
what? Wait, what?
You're like,
Yeah.
you're like, so if you have this and you have this, isn't that a plot hole? And you're like, I my god,
Yes, it is.
catastrophic rewrites. Like,
Yeah.
Right, right. Oh my gosh. Oh, what a
yes, someone changes names in the middle of the book.
right,
Well,
right.
and something that you think you nailed emotionally, it just didn't quite make it all the way out on the
Right,
page, and
right.
so, you need to go in and add a few beats or, change things around a
Mhm.
little bit.
Yeah, those adjustments when you think you're close to done can be very hard to
Yeah.
take. With that patience, once again, that we're trying to practice and being like, oh, I thought I was finished and now I need to rework this whole section. Yeah. Oh,
So, what is your least favorite? No, you just asked that. I'm sorry.
yeah. Sorry. That's okay.
What influences your writing?
Yeah.
Um, I read very broadly. So I write romance, but I read a lot of different genres. I read nonfiction, and it all makes it out onto the page in one
Mm,
way, shape, or form. Um, and I get bored. I get bored with reading the same types of stories over and over. That's one of the reasons I read broadly is, oh, I've read five sci-fi. Well, I can't read sci-fi for 6 months, so I read
right,
something else.
right,
And that happens to my writing too. So far, I have not made it past a trilogy.
right. Gotcha.
And I kind of switch. I have fantasy romance, I have paranormal, I have sci-fi, I even have a contemporary that I wrote that I haven't done anything with.
Mm.
So yeah, that influences me. My brain's need for new things on a
New
frequent
stimuli.
basis.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I think a lot of writers have that kind of struggle where you're like, I'm writing this, but shiny new idea looks so much more fun, and it's hard to balance. But I think it's very common for writers to kind of like skip around between projects or genres, and different things just to get that freshness, back in their lives and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I know. I like to do that. Like with my sister, we write short stories for compilations, and that's kind of nice because when you get kind of sick of one story, you're like, oh, let me try and work on this other prompt for a
Yeah,
different story, and it kind of keeps things moving. When you get like stuck or stale in one area, you just jump to a different project. That can be helpful.
I agree.
Yeah, because sometimes the desire to write is there, but not in the same story.
Yeah.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. Do you ever deal with writer's block? And if so, how do you kind of work against it?
um, I haven't had writer's block since I burned out about 2.5 years ago.
Right.
And then I knew exactly what was happening, and I just like, I need to take time off. And so I took about 2 months just to not do anything, which was
Hmm.
good. It's what I needed at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
I occasionally get stuck, and some of that is that barbecue
Yes.
analogy. And so I know I just need to take a break. I need to go do something else for a little
Hmm.
while. Sometimes it's a few days, sometimes it might be a few weeks. It depends. Usually it tends to run into the days rather than the weeks.
Right. You got to let
Um,
the flavor percolate and permeate and all of that while you take a step
yeah,
for yourself. Yeah.
yeah. And sometimes it's just a few minutes. I've literally walked away and gone for a 20-minute walk, and I've come back and I've
Right.
solved whatever problem it was. So,
Yes,
Yeah, no,
movement is so good
so
right.
for getting those ideas churning.
doing
Yeah,
the dishes often helps too.
yeah, no, we often talk about with people that like giving your hand or your body kind of something to do. Well,
Mhm.
your mind will keep working on the problem while you're like kind of just zoning out, doing the stuff with your hands, like the dishes or going for a walk is great. Because, like, I've always heard, your brain is a muscle, like
Yeah,
anything else, is an organ that needs blood. So when you're moving and doing walking, for example, you're getting fresh blood to your brain. It's going to work better, you know? So I think those are like great tips. I had a question about what were your signs of burnout though? Because I do think that sometimes people are burnt out and they don't know and they try to push through the writer's block, and that can make things worse. So what were your signs of burnout?
like nothing. Like I would sit there and like
Yeah,
nothing was going
yeah.
on anymore. It didn't
Kind
matter
of
what I was doing. I couldn't read, I couldn't write.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just I could crochet. Crochet helped a lot.
Yes, yes. That's
But
kind of one of those your hands are busy, but your mind can be unfocused. Yeah,
yeah, and I caught up on TV shows, and that helped
yeah.
too. Kind of refilled the
Yes,
creative well.
Yes,
Um,
yes, I love that. Hmm.
so
that's one
yeah,
of
it
my
was just
things.
I could feel it coming on, but I had to push through to some extent.
For work. Hmm.
I had a firm deadline. I
Yeah,
had to
right,
have this done, and then that deadline fell through for things that were so beyond my control.
right.
Um, and I was just like, I can't. It was like I can't. I'm done for a little while, and I knew I'd get back
Mhm.
to it relatively quickly, but I knew I just needed to give myself time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
I think with the burnout, like your brain feels deadened, your emotions feel
mhm.
deadened. You have those clues that it's more than just, I don't know where I'm going with the story, where it's like your body needs a break, your brain needs a break, your emotions even can need that break. So those are good signs to look out for because, like I said, sometimes we think it's just, I don't know what I'm doing with my story, and we try to push through it, and that can make things worse. I love that you said you watch shows to kind of refill your creativity because I
Yeah.
think that's important. We all know about self care. We all know we need sleep, but like we don't focus on like filling our creative wells again and
Mhm.
again
Yeah.
and again, so that we can then use creativity.
Yeah,
Um,
consuming story
mhm.
is such an important part of being a
Yeah,
writer. And
yes,
yes, that means reading, but it also means
TV
watching
shows,
movies and
movies.
TV shows
Yeah,
and
yeah.
documentaries and whatever else floats your boat because
Right, right.
you just have um, you just have you have to get ideas from somewhere.
Right. Yeah, no, you
Mhm.
need to be inspired from everything that's going on around you in life. I saw in a Facebook group for writers, somebody was saying like how important is reading. And it's not that like reading is important, even though it is, because like you get feedback from like how other writers are doing things. You can learn a lot if we are reading like authors and being like, what are they doing that works? What are they doing that doesn't work? And then you can apply that to your own writing, but it also includes things like visual media, audio,
Yeah.
Mhm.
music, other things that can inspire you, and other ways of like getting story through songs, through movies, through
Yes.
shows. That's all just as valid and important, I think.
I
Mhm.
agree.
Yeah, because especially like when you are burnt out, reading is like kind of the first thing that goes where you're like, I can't even
Well,
focus. I've been staring
reading
at the same
requires
paragraph.
effort. And
Yeah,
when
Yeah.
you're an author, unfortunately, it's hard to turn off that analytical part of your brain that
right.
is going, okay, I see the foreshadowing here. And, ooh, they
This
put two
concept's
adverbs
playing
in this
out.
paragraph. Very
Yeah,
daring.
yeah.
And you're analyzing it. You've got the editor part of your brain going, and you're
Yeah.
like,
Right,
oh,
right.
I wouldn't have done it that way. Whereas if you just grab your blanket and sit on the couch and marathon a season of a show, like
Yes,
you get that rest while you're just sort of
Mhm.
being fed, and you get
a
those
story.
uh,
Mhm.
it's very
Yeah,
low effort entertainment, but it's still very good for you because it's
yeah.
you get pulled in emotionally to these
Mhm.
characters, and you remember, like,
Mhm.
you're not picking it apart quite so much. Or
Yeah.
Right,
maybe you are, but it's easier, you know.
yeah, it doesn't require so much
So
effort of the brain. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
usually if something is working, I don't sit there, especially with visual media, I don't pick it apart.
Right,
mhm.
right,
It's
right.
only when it doesn't work that I'm like, okay, what can be better?
Yes.
Right, right. Those formulaic movies, I'll be like, oh, this is gonna happen next, and then this is gonna happen, and this
Yeah.
is the ending of the movie. Like it's very easy to like pick apart and be like, oh, this writing's not great.
But
But when
like
you
I
are
said,
enjoying the
that's
show,
fun.
it's much easier to relax and just enjoy the story,
Yeah.
Mhm.
storytelling. Hmm.
It's so fun to turn to someone, like, talk about this show and just rip it apart into,
Yes,
like, bits and be like, "You know what? The mistakes they made here, and this is what I would have
right.
done, and why did that character do that?" And, like, it's kind of fun to
It is
look at
very,
something, and in some ways, it sort of validates your own writing because 'cause you're like, "Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
man, I'm so much better than that," because
Right.
Like someone wrote this and a whole bunch of people greenlighted it, and then we got people together and they portrayed it, and then people in post production put it up, and it was still garbage.
Right. No. I have a couple movies that come to mind when you talk like that. Well, just like even like some of the things they greenlit, like Sharknado. They made a movie about a shark tornado.
I
Like,
know.
who would
And
have thought that was a great
we
idea?
got a
I know it was
sequel,
like
right?
meant to be campy and stuff, but it's just like,
Well, there's
Yeah.
comedy, which I mean, if you're going
yeah,
for
and then
comedy, there you go.
yeah, yeah,
It's okay to have some lighthearted fun, but at the same time,
right,
like you're
right,
like, how did that get past the pitch meeting?
right, right. How did that get past post production?
Yeah.
Did you, you know? But yes, no, it is a lot of fun, and I feel like it's part of human nature that like not only do we love to consume stories, but we love to talk about them after and be like, "You
Yeah.
should see this show. I need to share my thoughts with someone about this show." Like, we're always asking our friends, "Have you watched this?" or something, because I think that's a very human thing to be like, we need to tear the story apart and analyze every little bit of it.
Or
Yeah.
when you read a good book and you're like, please, bestie, read this book so we can talk about it. Like,
And then they're like, I cried and got so mad and threw the book across the room. Why did you do this to me? But I loved it. Like,
My husband will turn to me sometimes. He's like, "Why didn't I like that?" I'm like, "Oh, because of A, B, and C." He's like, "Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, you're right."
yes, yes. He knows he doesn't like it, but he doesn't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's so funny. Um,
so this is my favorite question.
yeah.
What has been your most significant writing victory so far?
Um. Oh goodness. So I would say 2 books ago, I did a contemporary fantasy holiday rom com. It took me 9 months, start to finish. Drafting, editing, and getting it published was only 9 months.
Wow.
That's impressive.
So I would say that that was my big my big impressive feat for
Yeah,
me
no,
anyway.
That is impressive.
that's very
So
impressive. Yeah,
since my first book took me 7 years,
right. No, that's
9 months felt like
amazing
nothing.
progress.
Can I ask, how many books have you published?
I have 8 out now,
Very
Okay.
nice.
and I should have 2 more out by the end of the year.
Okay.
Wow, yeah, that is amazing production. That's yeah, you should be very proud of yourself because it's hard enough to write one book and
Yeah,
get it seen through to completion, let alone publishing it. All the stuff
yeah.
that's involved in writing a book, and then you have 8 out and one that was done in well under a year. Like that's amazing, right? That is so awesome.
All right. What are you reading right now?
I am kind of in between books. I just finished Upright Women Wanted, which is a novella by Sarah Gailey for the Trans Rights Readathon. I'd heard so many good things about it and finally picked it up, and I knew like a novella was the right fit for me because I don't have a lot of free time for reading at the moment.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
And then so I just finished that yesterday, and I paused like a rom com, the X Talk,
Okay.
to kind of pick that up and read that for the readathon. So
Oh, okay. Very nice. Yeah. I love that you're aware of kind of when you're at your threshold and you're like, I just don't have the time or the space in my head for a story. Like, that's
Mhm.
great to know about yourself and like give yourself that kindness of like, we're going to tackle a novella, then take a little break,
yeah.
because it's important. You don't want to get to that burnout again. So that's really great. Now, this is my favorite question. It's a little bit controversial for some, but what is writing advice that you hate? Either you think it's like poorly applied or, poorly given.
So for me, it's the writing every day
Okay.
because I understand that the idea behind it is to build a writing habit,
Yes.
but that's what we need to say because writing every day does not work for everyone for a wide variety of
Yes.
reasons. It just doesn't. Trying to write every day for a short period of time isn't a bad idea for many writers to
Hmm.
at least try to see if writing every day works for them. But
Right.
yeah, I always say Yeah, really, what you should do is work on your writing, work on your author career most days a week for a
Mhm.
little while.
Right, right.
You know,
Yeah, yeah. I think you should be putting effort into the author stuff, but there's so many neurodivergencies. There's so many conditions people may have. Like if you
Mhm.
suffer with depression, sometimes functioning you can't even do, let alone writing. And so advice like that can be really alienating of I'm not good enough. I already don't feel good enough because I'm
Yeah,
depressed.
Mhm,
But then you add that pressure of I'm also not writing every day like everyone says I should be.
mhm.
But it's just not realistic for a lot of people, I
yeah.
think.
There's
I
care
would, yeah.
responsibilities. People have children,
Right.
people have, elders
Work.
they need to care
Mhm.
for, or siblings, or spouses
Right.
sometimes,
Right.
pets, even,
There's so much going on every day of our lives. I
Yeah,
like that you say it's a habit because I think
yeah.
like people yeah, people kind of like take it to the extreme when they say you need to write every day. It's like no, building a habit is great. Like Louis L'Amour
Mhm.
says, you can't get the water going until you turn on the faucet. So
Yeah,
there is that process of I need to write to know what writing feels like so that I can get into that mode when
yeah,
Mhm.
I want to. But I agree 100% that there's
Yeah.
so many reasons why you wouldn't be able to necessarily
Yeah.
write every day, and that
yeah.
pressure could be too much.
Yes.
And sometimes you need the thinking time. You need to
Mhm.
be doing the dishes and thinking about your story so that
Yes,
when you
Yes.
do have time to sit down and write, it
That
comes out.
writing in your head is so
yes.
Yeah,
important, and it's part of the process, and
Mm,
it is effectively you are writing,
yeah.
yes.
you know?
And then there's
Staring
and
out the
there's
window
learning
sometimes is
about
writing.
yeah, there's learning about writing too, picking
Yes,
up, yeah, grammar and story and character, and
yes.
taking workshops or reading books about it,
Mhm.
not all the time, but that's part of the writing process too, is learning how to improve your
Right.
craft. And
Yeah.
that's just as important as sitting down and doing it too.
Yes. That reminds me, I think, of what I was going to talk about earlier that I forgot. So a lot of people are like, you need 10,000 hours of practice to be good at anything.
Mhm.
But I think it's important to be getting feedback on your writing and not just doing the 10,000 hours. Because if we're not learning from reading or getting feedback from others, from workshops, from all those things that authors benefit from, then we can be practicing the wrong things for 10,000 hours. You're not going to get better, right? Like,
Very
so
true.
that part of learning as you go and applying what you learn is just as important as doing the writing. And I feel like sometimes we just focus on getting that writing down to get better rather than I need to read and see what other authors are doing well. I need to get feedback on my stories and see what I can improve on.
Yeah.
I think it's like so important to like focus on that as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, um, I can say with a surety that a lot of authors do not write every day.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Majority of the authors that we interview say that they do not write every day,
Hmm.
Yeah.
and and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay if that's not part of your
Yes,
process.
Yeah.
yes. And
During
I
my
have,
drafting process, I do write most days, if not
Mhm.
every day. But otherwise, yeah, I took time off this weekend and did author business stuff.
Mhm.
right, right. That takes up time as well. A lot of times, the marketing and the
Yes.
Yeah.
branding and all of that
And
stuff.
this week you took time for an interview. It
Yep.
counts.
Yes, yes, this is the author kind of stuff. So I love that. I do know some authors who do write every day, but I think that it works for them personally. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? But like, there's so many reasons why it might not work for you, and so don't feel bad if you can't.
Yeah.
But yes, we want to give you an opportunity just to let our audience know where they can find out more about you and your book. So here's the time to share your socials and your website, anything like that.
Sure. My website is emilymichaelauthor.com. Pretty much everything else can feed off of there. And my socials are at EMIMI Writer,
Okay,
WRITER. And that's on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.
very nice. And thank you so much for joining us. This, like I said, this conversation has really inspired me, and this is a great time talking with you. So we appreciate
Uh,
you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I had a great time.
We love to hear it. Yes. And thank you to everyone who's listening along at home. Remember, there's more than one way up the mountain, and our next episode releases on Friday, as always. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, you can find us on social media at The Tell Not Show or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.